kebijakan ekonominya tidak akan lagi liberal, ya. Dan dia punya historis, ya. Dalam tahun 98 dia kan tidak nembak siapapun, kan dia tidak nembak siapapun. Tapi seperti Wiranto di Timur Timur, Prabowo itu dianggap sebagai musuh apa hak asasi manusia. Ya, yang mati itu kan nggak ketahuan siapa yang nembak, nggak tahu.
Berarti yang
Tidak nembak siapapun.
siapa? Ya, song-songnya
Ya, contohnya kenapa?
song-songnya
Nggak seperti Prabowo dan seterusnya kan. Wiranto kan dicap sebagai musuh. Sekarang yang 30.000 di Palestina itu tidak dicap apa-apa kan. Nah, jadi perbedaan itu menimbulkan sentimen. Tapi bagaimanapun demokrasi kita sudah berjalan dengan baik. Nah, sehingga ini ada ahli ya, Ibu Dr. En Sukyun, my spelling oke ya?
Iya.
Sukyun ya, beliau dari apa namanya Department of Political Science di Wisconsin Medicine, dan juga Center for apa bu ya, Center for Southeast Asian Studies ya.
Yes.
Southeast Asian Studies. Nah, di sini ahli-ahli apa dari studi Islam ya, cukup banyak ya. Mungkin 20 menit ya. Ibu Jung silakan menyampaikan dan mengenalkan teman yang ada di sini. Dan kami sangat berterima kasih kehadiran Ibu ya di sini untuk yang kedua kali ya. Ada salam dari Prof. Samsudin. Kita beri aplaus untuk beliau ya. Ya, silakan. Nanti ada teman-teman jurnalis di apa? Silakan.
Terima kasih banyak mengajarkan saya. Saya senang sekali hari ini bertemu Bapak dan Ibu-ibu yang terhormat di Indonesia. Sebenarnya saya harus belajar dari Bapak-bapak dan Ibu-ibu daripada saya membuka diskusi. Karena saya dari mungkin luar negeri, saya akan membuka diskusi yang pendek dan mungkin kita bisa lebih mendiskusikan isu-isu yang muncul di dalam. Sebelum saya mulai, saya introduksikan mahasiswa saya. Ini Clarence Handoko, dia bisa berbahasa Indonesia, dia S3 Sosiologi. You wanna?
Iya, terima kasih sekali semuanya. Nama saya Clarence Handoko. Saya sekarang lagi belajar S3 di University of Wisconsin-Madison di dalam sosiologi. Dan sekarang tema penelitian saya itu di dalam digital politics di Indonesia dan juga di Southeast Asia. Ya, itu saja. Terima kasih.
And another mahasiswa, dia S1, jurusannya ilmu politik dan musik, and dia bisa bahasa Arab, so you can introduce yourself.
Boleh, bahasa Arab bisa
bahasa Indonesia.
Bahasa Arab dari mana Pak Ratno?
English. Nama saya Bremen, and I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I study music and political science, and I mainly study politics in the Middle East and women's rights in the Middle East.
Why all female students, no male students?
Just because they're outstanding. I just chose the ones that were outstanding.
Okay.
But thank you very much for having us here. Again, it's such a privilege to be able to meet with all of you in the same space. I was given a topic of Islam and democracy. And the fact that we just finished, Indonesia has gone through the election, I thought maybe we can look at Quran Islam di dalam pemilu Indonesia, and what will be the sort of prediksi atau implikasi untuk presidency Prabowo dan democracy, like prospect for democracy. So, as you can see, I can maybe jump in.
Okay, it's okay, English.
Yeah.
English.
It is okay. So, Islam and national elections, that the role of Islam has changed over time in Indonesia. As you know, since Indonesia's democratization, in first time in 1999, which is the second democratic election in Indonesia, we saw a little bit of revival of aliran politics. And some of the scholars talked about, like Dwight King talked about that how the voting patterns in 1999 resembles in 1955 election. But that did not last long. They're quickly weakening of Islamic privileges or the issue of Islamic vote, Islamic pattern of vote in 2004 and 2009. So for those two elections, a lot of scholars, observers of Indonesia talked about weakening of Islamic privileges. What's really important is actually leadership matters, right? Like the partisanship matters, but not necessarily Islam. But then again, Indonesia's election changes again in 2014 and 2019. They mentioned that there was a rise of Islamic populism, or some people will call it rise of identity politics, right? So, and as you know for sure, it's more so than 2019 than 2014. The stronger tendency of identity politics you all experience in 2019. So, for example, the patterns that has been showing in 2014 elections will be pluralist versus Islamist. So for example, back then, the candidate Prabowo Subianto in his campaign supported the idea that state is expected to guarantee the purity of religious teaching from all forms of heresy and deviation. That's the idea that he proposed, or he actually supported in the 2014 election. But then 2019 election, even the polarization has been heightened in 2019 elections. And you see there's a division between pro-Islamic populism. So populism here is defined in a way that the populism literature defines in a very, itself is very rich. But for Indonesian context, I'm defining populism as the Muslims has to receive privilege from the government because they're the majority. And other minority ethnic groups, they should not be treated as equally as, right, Muslims. So there was in 2019 election, there was a division between this pro-Islamic populism versus anti-Islamic populism. But so if you look at the result of the election in 2019, you will see the strong correlation found between the former presidential candidate at that time, the Prabowo Subianto supporters, and their propensity for displaying high level of pro-Islamic populist attitude. On the other hand, President Jokowi's supporters display consistent tendency of being anti-Islamic populist, so-called more pluralistic approach. However, 2024, things have changed. And this is where actually I would love to hear from how you actually see the 2024 elections from your own perspective. So the so-called, there's an absence of Islamic populism in the 2024 election, less of the identity politics per se. And all the candidates tend to move to a center. Even most Islamic, so-called most Islamic candidate, which is the Anies Baswedan's pair, did not emphasize ideological position. Instead, they focus more on more relatively more of the action-related policies, or ethnic policies, but not necessarily Islamist tendencies. So, and as you can see, all three candidates had NU background vice president. And so you can see that salience of sort of mainstream moderate Islam that existed in Indonesia, that prevalence of that in the 2024 election. So why? I guess the question is, why would that be the case, right? We started with the Aliran politics where the Islam was important. And again, doesn't really matter whether it's important or not important in elections, but it has implication for the future. So we are talking about it. Why is there the absence of Islamic populism in this election? And what's that sort of imply for the future? And there are a number of scholars who actually talked about why, right? So one, maybe some people call it state repression. President Jokowi banned the Islamic Defenders Front in 2020. And Hizb ut-Tahrir was banned, right, 2017. So some scholars will say it is the result of state repression that made them cautious. But some people who look at it more positive perspective would say it is the success of anti-radicalization campaign that made these Islamic groups or Islamist groups not very active in this election. But another group of scholars actually talk about this election is different in a way that there's more strength of elite-based patronage politics. They're more transactional coalition building, not necessarily ideologically driven, but instead is more transactional that takes priority over any programmatic policies or ideological platforms. So elite level horse trading increased in 2024. And ideological differences in getting into the sideline has been sidelined. And shifting of political alliances. Before there was a nationalist and Islamist and more of like pluralists. Those are the sort of the factions that existed. Now there's a shifting of political alliances among nationalists and religious elites. That in this coalition, Islamists were not that necessary in winning in the election. So, but these are the two explanations that coming from more state perspective or the elite. One is state, the other one is elite. The other one is, it's actually, there's no unifying force of Islamists. The Islamists taking various strategies that they, some are trying to be closer to government, some are trying to focus more on religious propagation. So doing more sermons, building on more grassroots instead of involved in politics. So having variety of strategies in more building up to their own grassroots, not focusing more on the issues of like political involvement, there might be also reason that they are not that visible. or some people will say there was no polarizing issue in this election that related with Islam. Even though there was a backdrop of this, Palestine and Israel war, that a lot of people were involved in the protest against Israel's that inhumane action, the war that is going on. Even then, still, it did not become the polarizing issue for Indonesian election. So these are the sort of reasons for why that there was absence of Islamic populism in this election. But what does that mean for Prabowo Subianto's presidency? A lot of people say he moved to a center, and as Pak Didik Rabinik started this discussion with mentioning that he seems to be nationalist. He's showing the nationalistic tendency, but is he really nationalist? And so I think the question remains, did he really move to a center? Yes, maybe for election he moved to a center, and he did appeal to broader constituencies in order to gain the vote. But Islamists, I guess question is, will that actually tendency remain? That whether he will stay center is actually questionable. And given that his prior history or trajectories that he had shown, he has been highly pragmatic, right? And also he owns the tactical acumen that he can move from very much Islamist to nationalist. Also, he was the part of former Suharto's oligarch, to now he appealed to constituencies as very much moderate figure. So in that sense, it's very unclear whether he will maintain a center. Is quite uncertain. We'll probably have to see how things unfold in the presidency. And also whether Islamists will continue to stay low as they have been is very uncertain, because Islamists actually have a lot of resources still, and they do have a mobilizational capacity. And the fact that they are sidelined by state repression, it gives a kind of concerns for a lot of people when sort of from the perspective from like inclusion moderation thesis, is that when you are included, when the groups or the ideas are included in the system, they tend to moderate. When they're excluded from the system, they can radicalize. So for maybe Jokowi's anti-radicalization program might have been successful for this election for a short term. I'm not sure how long this anti-radicalization policy will stay successful, and how Prabowo will use this anti-radicalization policy for moving forward. So that's the sort of topic. And one last thing before I close, I also wanted to talk about, so what does that mean for Indonesia's democracy? Indonesia has been praised as the best democracy in Southeast Asia, and this is right? Like third largest democracy, when a lot of countries going through backsliding. Indonesia has been doing very strongly, but this election or election outcome has been a big concern to a lot of scholars and observers alike. So for example, like Guardian writers who claim the Prabowo's victory in 2024 was a sign that winter is coming for Indonesia's democracy. Or similarly, another scholar who also argues that democracy is truly lost with the Prabowo's victory. And we have seen over time that there was a little bit of backsliding, democratic backsliding is happening in Indonesia. So I'm gonna end here, but not with a note that this is the end of story per se, but it is more of, democracy can be crafted. The leader alone does not throw whole democracy away, right? That we have a very strong civil society. We have these educational institutions who are the really important infrastructure for democracy. So I think that Indonesia's democracy is still possible, and we can definitely slow down the backsliding and back to where it's supposed to be. But I would love to hear about what you actually think of it, because whether I'm happy to be contradicted and also happy to hear what you think about your own country's democracy, as well as what you think it as that important step that need to be taken for all of you. So thank you.
Okay ya, tetap bilingual ya. Our discussion good and better and bilingual. So the statement about the winter is coming, state repression is still our question in the future democracy. This is very important. Kalau kita dari luar seperti Ibu Ensuk ya, melihat gereja miring dari luar bisa, tapi dari dalam nggak bisa. Jadi kalau kita ada di dalam masjid atau gerejanya miring itu kita nggak tahu. Baru setelah di luar seperti itu miring. Ini winter, ini state repression. Dan memang Prabowo ini akan mengambil koalisi +2 +3. +2 itu adalah Nasdem sudah diambil. Siapa lagi? PKB sudah tahu karena berkuasa. +3 PKS. Dan nanti di Pilkada DKI itu akan bergabung. Dan Prabowo kepada Anies walaupun bertengkar di dalam 11%, dia bisa jadi menteri, bisa diambil jadi menteri. Sehingga pola Jokowi untuk mengambil seluruh kekuatan parlemen dan tidak ada check and balances itu mungkin terjadi. Karena itu ini penting ya, Ibu Ensuk kemarin nggak apa-apa menyentuh election, boleh nggak apa-apa, di Parlemen kritiknya keras sekali. Oke, bagus sekali. Silakan Pak Arif share. Sama Al-Mukarram Lutfi.
Ya, terima kasih. Ketemu lagi 5 tahun lalu ya.
Pak Naril, Director of Research and
Ya, topiknya sebenarnya kita mungkin tidak terlalu bahas konteks Islam dan demokrasi dalam arti yang mungkin saya sudah pernah paparkan ya 2 tahun lalu. Tapi mungkin saya ingin, tadi juga sudah disoroti, sudah di-highlight beberapa hal yang menurut saya mungkin bisa kita afirmasi ya, beberapa hal yang di-highlight oleh Profesor Institute. Pertama, barangkali saya ingin menyoroti bahwa Indonesia pasca Orde Baru itu menjadi momen paling penting buat sejarah demokrasi di Indonesia, karena ada 3 hal yang menurut saya terjadi perubahan besar. Pertama, politik yang lebih terbuka di pasca Orde Baru, di era reformasi. Yang kedua, penguatan civil society. Yang ketiga, menurut saya upaya untuk menciptakan good governance. Menurut saya 3 hal itu menjadi semacam cita-cita bersama ketika kita memasuki era reformasi. Nah, tapi barangkali seperti yang kita, mungkin sebagian teman-teman juga di sini menjadi praktisi dalam politik dan juga menjadi pengamat dalam politik, merasakan bahwa dalam rentang waktu sekitar 25 tahun setelah reformasi, kita merasakan bahwa dalam 1 dekade banyak analisa dari para sarjana terjadi proses kemunduran demokrasi di Indonesia. Nah, menurut saya pada hal yang pertama tentang politik yang lebih terbuka, di sini ada semacam kegamangan pada akhirnya. Tentu kita melihat bahwa politik di era Orde Baru itu tidak kompetitif, gitu ya, tertutup. Pemenang pemilu kita sudah ketahui, Partai Golkar, dan kita mau menciptakan satu sistem politik yang lebih terbuka. Ada multi partai di situ. Dan menurut saya tahun 99, tahun 2004 kita menikmati proses itu. Tapi barangkali seperti kita saksikan dalam 10 tahun terakhir muncul satu praktek yang mungkin kita tidak harapkan tapi terjadi, yaitu oligarki. Jadi partai-partai politik yang kita lihat yang masuk dalam parlemen pada umumnya itu berbasiskan para tokoh atau modal, gitu ya, para pengusaha yang mungkin punya kemampuan untuk bisa dalam tanda kutip membeli suara dalam politik. Dan sekarang mungkin akan ada upaya untuk karena ada upaya untuk melakukan amandemen di MPR, dan mungkin salah satu isu yang mungkin akan dibahas juga soal evaluasi terhadap pemilihan langsung. Mungkin itu salah satu, meskipun tentu saja itu akan terjadi perdebatan yang akan sengit. Nah, dalam konteks itu kita melihat politik yang terbuka yang sebenarnya menjadi harapan perbaikan politik di Indonesia itu kita pada saat ini di internal, maksudnya banyak masyarakat Indonesia atau para politisi juga mengalami kecamangan. Apakah ini akan kita teruskan dengan tradisi seperti ini atau ada upaya untuk menyederhanakan? Upaya untuk menyederhanakan partai politik menurut saya sudah beberapa kali dilakukan, tapi parliamentary threshold itu tidak selalu mulus seperti yang kita harapkan. Misalnya upaya untuk 5%, tapi yang terakhir kita hanya sepakat di 4%, ya. Itu mungkin negosiasi di antara para politisi yang mereka hasilkan. Tapi intinya yang saya ingin katakan bahwa dalam konteks politik yang lebih terbuka ada situasi di mana kita mungkin seperti gamang, gitu ya, apakah kita akan tetap seperti itu dengan konsekuensi bahwa pada saat ini kalau orang menjadi politisi, menjadi anggota DPR, atau dia mau menjadi wali kota, atau menjadi gubernur, kalau tidak punya uang atau tidak didukung oleh modal, akan sangat sulit untuk bisa tampil di politik. Nah, itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, barangkali hal yang juga kita evaluasi itu adalah pelemahan civil society. Tadi sudah menyebut bahwa sejak 2017 itu ada revisi namanya Undang-Undang Ormas. yang sebenarnya itu target utama semua sudah tahu bahwa itu adalah HTI dan EPI. Dan yang tidak diantisipasi oleh banyak NGO dan civil society bahwa kalau undang-undang itu diterapkan, maka itu akan berimbas kepada semua, termasuk NGO yang mungkin isunya pada hak asasi manusia, pada kebebasan demokrasi dan lain-lain. Jadi, dan itu terjadi setelah 2017 dengan menerapkan undang-undang ormas. Sekarang seluruh NGO dan LSM itu mengalami sekarat, tidak bisa melakukan aktivitas sebagaimana seharusnya civil society lakukan. Sebagai contoh misalnya NGO atau LSM untuk mendapatkan logistik donor dari pihak funding, dia harus mendapatkan restu dari kementerian.
Mendagri. Kayak Soeharto.
Ya. Kementerian bisa Kemendagri,
Kayak Soeharto.
bisa Kementerian Bappenas, bisa PMK dan macam-macam, tergantung program apa. Dan program yang dilakukan oleh NGO itu harus sejalan dengan program pemerintah. Itu artinya fungsi balancing dari NGO, dari civil society itu tidak berjalan. Jadi dia semacam IO akhirnya, dan semacam event organizer dari program-program yang sudah dirancang oleh pemerintah. Dan itu menurut saya bagian dari upaya pelemahan. Dan kita saksikan sekarang, mungkin Bu Ensikyung bisa cek di dalam LSM-LSM NGO di Indonesia, sedikit sekali yang mampu untuk bertahan. Ya barangkali yang mampu untuk bertahan di antara yang ada sekarang yang besar, ada NU, ada Muhammadiyah, dan tentu juga dengan dinamika yang ada di dalamnya ya. Tapi intinya proses pelemahan itu terjadi sejak 2017 dan sampai sekarang kita belum melihat ada kemungkinan untuk terjadi penguatan kembali ya, civil society. Memang ada proyek di mana di masa-masa itu agar institusi negara itu semakin kuat, tetapi penguatan institusi negara menurut saya juga harus dibarengi oleh check and balancing yang cukup ya, yang mereka tidak bisa bertindak secara sewenang-wenang tanpa kontrol. Praktis kalau menurut saya sekarang pemerintah baik dari parlemen maupun dari NGO itu sedikit sekali kontrol dan balancing yang bisa dilakukan. Dan dalam arti itu, menurut saya demokrasi itu sebenarnya sudah selesai dalam konteks itu. Nah, yang ketiga itu soal penguatan good governance. Seperti kita ketahui sejak 2003 kita itu punya KPK, Komisi Pemberantasan Korupsi, dan sebenarnya apa yang kita produksi di tahun 2003 itu adalah upaya kita untuk melahirkan satu pemerintahan yang bersih, dan itu memberikan harapan. Menurut saya sejak 2005 tahun pertama, 5 tahun kedua, kita melihat hal yang sebelumnya kita tidak pernah saksikan. Misalnya menteri ditangkap karena korupsi, anggota DPR ditangkap. Itu bisa kita saksikan ketika KPK itu sudah lahir. Nah, tapi dalam beberapa tahun terakhir, paling tidak dalam 5-10 tahun ini, KPK itu mengalami perubahan, wewenangnya dikurangi, dan seperti yang kita rasakan, persepsi indeks korupsi di Indonesia itu mengalami penurunan. Jadi tentu saja 3 hal itu menjadi catatan yang sangat penting, dan sebagian besar di masyarakat Indonesia merasakan bahwa terjadi decline, kemunduran dari cita-cita reformasi yang sebenarnya kita upayakan untuk membuat Indonesia menjadi lebih baik. Nah, kemudian ya dalam konteks Islam, bagaimana khususnya sebagaimana yang direpresentasikan di dalam organisasi-organisasi besar Islam, bagaimana merespon itu, menurut saya ini juga menjadi satu catatan buat kita bahwa bagaimanapun menurut saya demokrasi itu hanya bisa survive dengan proyek emansipasi di dalam masyarakat yang berjalan baik. Ya. Artinya secara pendidikan masyarakat itu harus semakin baik, secara ekonomi masyarakat ekonomi kesejahteraannya juga harus semakin baik. Tanpa itu menurut saya akan sangat sulit. Dan itu praktis terjadi sampai sekarang. Menurut saya setelah 25 tahun kita melewati era reformasi, dengan praktek politik yang kita saksikan pada 2024, money politik tinggi, orang bagi-bagi sembako, itu sangat ironi. Maksudnya tidak seperti yang kita harapkan bagaimana proses demokrasi itu berjalan sebagai proses public reasoning. Jadi di mana orang memilih itu didasarkan pada program-program yang baik, rencana-rencana kebijakan yang baik. Tetapi yang terjadi siapa yang kasih apa gitu ya. Dan itu praktek semacam itu terjadi di semua level menurut saya, baik pada pemilihan tingkat nasional sampai DPRD. Nah, sekali lagi dalam konteks itu organisasi Islam besar di Indonesia tidak cukup mampu untuk membendung itu. Bagaimana mendidik warga, dalam hal ini misalnya warga Muslim, untuk bisa menciptakan satu tradisi demokrasi yang sehat. Dan ada kecenderungan karena organisasi ini memiliki basis massa yang besar, dia menjadi semacam dalam tanda kutip broker untuk politisi kepada masyarakat. Dan menurut saya itu satu hal yang seharusnya tidak terjadi setelah 25 tahun kita reformasi. Nah, menurut saya kalau dikatakan ya kita politik misalkan yang miring gitu ya, yang di luar, mungkin di dalam juga terasa sedikit gitu politik. Ada miring-miring gitu ya, ada goyang-goyang dikit. Jadi atau banyak mungkin. jadi ya mungkin ini pandangan yang mungkin oleh sebagian cukup elitis ya, maksudnya orang-orang yang mungkin ada di universitas bisa membicarakan itu, tetapi di level masyarakat saya rasa yang terbaru itu saya nggak tahu, kalau tidak salah dari Kompas ya, tingkat kepuasan masyarakat terhadap Jokowi masih di kisaran 79 sampai 80%. Dan menurut saya itu tinggi. Artinya itu memang merefleksikan apa yang dialami oleh masyarakat. Ya mayoritas memang secara ekonomi dan pendidikan kita memang masih rendah. Dan menurut saya itu salah satu, ya kalau mau disebut sebagai kegagalan, itu kegagalan kita semua. Dan secara khusus barangkali negara tidak berhasil mentransformasi masyarakat agar lebih powerful gitu ya, dan membiarkan masyarakat tidak berdaya, sehingga barangkali pemerintah lebih leluasa untuk melakukan hal-hal yang barangkali menurut mereka pandang baik gitu. Barangkali dari saya itu. Terima kasih.
Okay, very similar analysis between Ibu and Sujung and Dr. Sunaryo. Backsliding democracy, decreasing role of society, and so on. Silakan senior lecturer, Pak Lutfi, silakan siapa? Silakan Pak Wibi, Dr. Wibi.
Ya, terima kasih. Ya, saya pakai bahasa Indonesia saja kalau itu ya. Ya, saya kira saya I don't see the
And so you
Answer.
and so
ya, hubungan Islam dan demokrasi itu tidak selalu positif, dan di dalam apa yang Islam itu akan perbedaan sikapnya dengan demokrasi. Khusus untuk Indonesia sebenarnya kalau melihat pada sejarah politik, kita melihat bahwa tidak ada penentangan dengan demokrasi dari Islam itu sendiri ya. Kalau mau dikatakan itu adalah organisasi Islam, tapi justru yang mulai otoritarianisme di Indonesia itu bukan pihak Islam. Islam tadi adalah Presiden Soekarno sendiri yang kita tidak bisa senior politik mengatakan bahwa dia adalah wakil Islam walaupun dalam ideologi itu pun tergantung dengan Islam ya. Mungkin satu kecualian adalah kita menunjukkan PII ya, Islam atau Suwirel dia tetap sebagai salah satu representatif itu ya daripada Islam gitu. Itu tidak signifikan juga karena saya sangat kecil ya sedikit dan tidak mendapat keuntungan dari pemerintah. Jadi sesungguhnya itu hampir tidak ada penolakan yang signifikan dari sana Islam dalam sejak Indonesia. Itu yang mulai dari Indonesia tidak ada hanya mungkin yang problem sekarang ini adalah kalau saya kurang melihat sebagai orang Islam tapi justru perilaku daripada sejumlah elit ya di dalam memperlakukan demokrasi dalam sistem demokrasi. Jadi ada kecenderungan otoritarianisme yang itu dipengaruhi bisa jadi oleh budaya Indonesia sendiri ataupun juga ada unsur dukungan dari partai tertentu yang memang secara doktrin itu masih memiliki doktrin Islam agama tengah, yaitu adalah pemerintah itu sejauh menjalankan syariat Islam itu harus diikuti. Apakah dia demokratis ataupun otoriter itu tidak salah. Itu adalah berkaitan dengan ideologi atau strategi jamaah dan tidak berpengaruh dari pada waktu itu memperlukan otoriter itu sebagai pilihan yang lebih baik daripada stabilitas ketidakstabilan di dalam masyarakat Muslim pada waktu itu ya. Tapi invasi Mongol itu sehingga terjadi perpecahan di dalam perpecahan di dalam itu masih tetap dipakai juga oleh sebagian kalangan Islam. Bukan menentang demokrasi itu sendiri, tetapi di dalam memberikan legitimasi terhadap pemerintah yang ada kecenderungan otoritarianisme. Jadi oleh karena itu kalangan tokoh yang melanggar prinsip demokrasi itu memang menjadi lebih leluasa untuk bersifat otoriter dikarenakan sebagian dari pemimpin Islam itu memang memberikan legitimasi terhadap sikap seperti itu. Kira-kira itu yang apa sih yang
So, backsliding state repression, backsliding democracy, state repression has been happened during Jokowi, right? Repression will be discontinuing to the next president. And from perspective Islam, from the Abad Tengah experience, cannot stimulate democracy, just accept what the leaders mentioned. Kalau bisa, kalau tidak, mari silakan.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Ju. It was an enlightening presentation and I was enjoying it. Terima kasih dan selamat datang di Indonesia. And we are actually happy now for, or we are enjoying the sepak bola And you know, now we are switching from politics to sports.
Sports, yeah.
And by the way, our Timnas coach is from
Oh,
Korea.
there. That was.
So
That was-
that's why I'm concerned. After our sport is coached by the Korean, and then politics and Islamic issue, and also will be dominated by the Korean scholar.
No, saya cuma belajar.
Ya, terima kasih. Saya punya beberapa catatan ya. I think beberapa yang Prof. Jung katakan tadi, ada beberapa yang masih berlaku dan sudah berubah. Jadi tadi beliau menjelaskan perbedaan antar pemilu ya. Kalau kita perhatikan pemilu terakhir ini sebetulnya itu agak berbeda dari dua pemilu sebelumnya. Ya. Kalau dua pemilu sebelumnya benar kita bicara tentang polarisasi, tentang kelompok Islam, Islamic radicalism dan seterusnya. Tapi the last election saya kira itu sangat berbeda. Ya, concern utamanya bukan lagi Islamic extremism, bukan lagi polarization in terms of religious affiliation, tetapi pada apa yang sedang terjadi di Indonesia itu democratic erosion atau democratic decline, dan ini adalah bagian dari fenomena global. Ya. Seperti kita tahu, sejak 2014 Indonesia itu mengalami kemunduran demokrasi. Kalau kita lihat indeks-indeks demokrasi dunia, kebebasan itu semuanya turun sejak Pak Jokowi. Ya, masa keemasan demokrasi Indonesia itu disukai atau tidak pada kepemimpinan Pak SBY. 2013 sampai 2005 sampai 2013 itu Indonesia menurut Freedom House mendapatkan status full free country. Tidak banyak negara Muslim yang mendapatkan status itu. Saya kira Indonesia satu-satunya pada saat itu. Dan sampai sekarang tidak pernah turun. Bahkan Turki, the first secular Muslim state itu nggak pernah mendapatkan status itu sampai sekarang. Nah, sejak Pak Jokowi mengalami penurunan yang sangat serius, sebabnya banyak, tadi Pak Sunaryo sudah menyebutkan beberapa, salah satunya misalnya ada undang-undang ormas, itu sangat merugikan kita dari sisi demokrasi. Dan pemilu kemarin itu pertaruhan betul. Kita ingin mengubah apa yang makanya pertarungannya adalah continuity and change, keberlanjutan dan perubahan. Keberlanjutan itu artinya melanjutkan korupsi, melanjutkan authoritarianism, the so-called legal authoritarianism. Jadi dia demokratik, tapi karena menggunakan instrumen hukum, dia menjadi otoriter. Nah, pemilu kemarin itu menurut saya tidak ada sama sekali unsur polarisasi Islam. Jadi salah kalau kita mengatakan bahwa pemilu kemarin itu ada pertarungan Islam, sama sekali tidak ada. Gitu, Bang. Itu adalah perjuangan untuk mengubah status quo dengan isu perubahan. Karena itu meskipun kemarin ada 3 calon sebetulnya yang kontestasi secara real itu 2, yaitu Pak Prabowo dan Anies Baswedan. Itu yang menjelaskan kenapa suara Ganjar itu kecil sekali. Karena dia tidak mendefinisikan keberlanjutan dan perubahan. Gitu. Dan kelihatannya pertarungan itu masih akan terus berlanjut nih ke pilkada, Pak Rektor. Ya, apapun nanti hasilnya, tapi semangat untuk itu masih berlanjut, terutama di kalangan aktivis lah. Mungkin semangatnya sudah agak kendur. Saya melihat beberapa teman saya itu sudah agak kendur karena yang pendukung perubahan sekarang sudah mulai lumer.
Kalau Jakarta calonnya para media semua, Soebul Iman,
Makanya.
Samara,
Enggak, persoalannya adalah itu mengirimkan pesan yang agak kurang bagus buat perjuangan demokrasi. Yaitu misalnya kayak Nasdem, saya kan termasuk yang berusaha mempengaruhi di dalam ya, tapi yang namanya partai politik susah sekali kan. Mereka punya rule of thumb-nya sendiri sehingga susah sekali mengubah. Tapi kita berusaha untuk mendorong agar sekuat mungkin untuk memperjuangkan nilai-nilai demokrasi yang selama ini kita lakukan. Nah, kebetulan memang pengusung demokrasi atau perubahan itu ada pada Anies Baswedan. Dan itu sangat aneh sekali, bukan aneh, weird ya, bahasa Indonesia. Agak unik lah. Karena Anies dulu dianggap sebagai simbol polarisasi, dia yang politik identitas, tapi tiba-tiba tahun pemilu terakhir dia menjadi champion for democracy, champion for freedom, dan seterusnya. Tapi kenyataannya memang begitu. Realitas politiknya, Anies begitu besar didukung oleh suara-suara pro-demokrasi dan kebebasan. Beberapa orang yang dulu mengecam Anies kemudian berbalik secara diam-diam mendukung. Bukan sepenuhnya karena suka terhadap Anies, tetapi rezim itu harus dilawan. Jadi orang mendukung Anies not necessarily because they like Anies, because they want to
Change.
they want to change and menjatuhkan kekuasaan meskipun itu gagal. Nah, jadi kesimpulannya pemilu terakhir dan sampai sekarang itu persoalannya adalah perlawanan terhadap status quo, perlawanan terhadap keberlanjutan. Nah, terakhir sekali satu catatan lagi tadi Profesor Jung menyebutkan soal political Islam. Nah, ini kita menyaksikan satu fenomena yang menarik sebetulnya. Ya, tahun ini satu lagi partai Islam itu tumbang, namanya P3. Ya. P3 adalah partai tertua. Dia bersama PDIP dan Golkar sejak Orde Baru, dan dia salah satu dari dua partai yang berlandaskan Islam secara formal, PKS dan P3. Nah, ini tinggal satu sekarang. We only have one Islamic political party, itu PKS, gitu. Ya, meskipun suaranya naik, tapi sebetulnya PKS secara umum signifikan. Nah, menurut saya ini penting. Ya, kejatuhan P3 ini penting sebagai partai lama yang punya masa cukup kuat, tapi pada akhirnya dia tidak mendapatkan kursi yang cukup. Ya, jadi ini mengkonfirmasi banyak sekali tesis, termasuk saya waktu saya membuat disertasi doktoral dulu, salah satu prediksi atau bacaan saya ke depan bahwa Indonesia itu ke depan secara politik makin sekuler, pembicaraan tentang agama dan politik makin tidak relevan, tetapi secara sosial itu makin konservatif, makin religius. Jadi you have to differentiate between politics and sociology.
Benar.
Politically, Indonesia is more secular, but sociologically they are more conservative and more religious. Nah, jadi itu penting. Dan saya juga tren ini akan terus berlanjut. Dan kalau PKS ini kan sedang mengubah diri terus. Kalau ke depan dia makin terbuka, makin moderat, maka itu satu-satunya yang bisa mempertahankan diri Partai Islam. Kenapa PKS sampai sekarang masih bisa terus bertahan? Ya karena dia bisa beradaptasi dengan perubahan zaman. Kan beda sekali PKS sekarang dengan PKS tahun 1999 sampai awal-awal 2000-an. Nah, jadi makin kemari politik Islam itu makin nggak relevan. Ke depan partai-partai politik, agenda politik ke depan pembicaraannya sama seperti politik di dunia manapun, soal ekonomi, soal kesehatan, soal pendidikan dan lain-lain. Saya kira itu catatan.
Oke, your response in English.
Dari Zoom ada Pak Andi Faisal Bakri.
Silakan Pak Andi ya, from Zoom ya. Pak Andi, will you?
Oke, terima kasih. Suara saya terdengar ya? Suara saya terdengar?
Silakan.
Oke.
Prof. Andi Faisal
Terima kasih.
from UIN.
Enso Jung and Prof. Didi Rahbini, dan kawan-kawan semuanya, Kang Pipip, Pak Malik, dan Pak Sunario. Okay, I would like to emphasize the issue of identity politics that you had mentioned in your presentation. I would like to ask you the co-optation done by Jokowi by appointing JK Yusuf Kalla as a vice president, because considering his background from Islamic Association of Indonesia, which call HMI, and also his backgrounds as NU leader. And also Ma'ruf Amin was basically NU leader, and in fact also leader of Ulama Council of Indonesia. And then we knew that actually Ma'ruf Amin was also one of the leaders of 212 movement, in the 2017, which is basically, in this case, Jokowi was playing identity politics rather than Muslims who are playing identity politics. So this is, I think, the same thing for Ahok, if you remember. Actually, he was the one who mentioned the irrelevancy of Al-Ma'idah 51. The Quranic verse saying that don't appoint non-Muslims as your leader. And because of that, this speech was viral among Indonesians, particularly Jakarta people. Consequently, people of Jakarta also were building reactions against this identity politics that was raised by Ahok. So this is one of the important things that we need to also remind the West and also foreign specialists, maybe also domestic or national perspective. Number two that I would like to raise in this case is that there is an emerging and powerful influence of Islamic scholars in defining or in determining or defining basically the meaning of Islam in relation to politics. Because we have seen scholars from state Islamic universities, either state or including private universities, the scholars basically tend to believe that there is no so-called Islamic state. Particularly, I support Pak Sunario's opinion that the weakening of civil society organizations due to the dismantlement of FPI, Islamic Forum of Youth, including HTI, Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia. Because of that, people, including scholars, were basically forced to think in different way by supporting the idea of Pak Malik, which is basically people reorienting their strategy instead of ideology in a political way, but ideology through economics and social and cultural strategies. This is shortly I can probably elaborate this in a longer explanations, but since this is very short, I return to you. What is your opinion regarding this observation? Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Prof. Andi Faisal. Ya. Any other? Pak Khalid, senior jurnalis from Tempo, Korban. Any other, Pak Malik? Huh? Okay, please. Ya. Oke,
Terima
Pak
kasih,
Dr.
Pak.
Malik Dismar.
Terima kasih, Bu Jumbo.
Yeah.
I second a lot of what Lucy said initially, but I just want to add a couple of little things or big things. The elephant in the room, so I think in Indonesian politics right now, or the apa kacau balonnya ya, politics or demokrasi di Indonesia adalah partai politik. That's the elephant in the room. We have a very, very corrupt political party, or actually very corrupt political institution. And if you follow Acemoglu, this will bring down everything. You know, corrupt political institutions will basically bring down everything because it's expected to look for money from these political activities. And we have that. And because of that, I think we today, I think, and I think never before, I think that we can feel or really questions, do we still actually have separations of power? Do we really have that? Or actually power is actually concentrated in you know, in this case, for example, Pak Jokowi, you know,
Yeah.
or a very few, you know, very few people around him. What we have is not separations of power, but it's distributions of power. And the distributions of power works only if corruptions actually run or through the mechanisms of that. And of course, like experience and everything, part of Jokowi can say, you know, I know everybody's in you know in the political party. Saya tahu kartunya semua. You know that expression, right? Saya tahu kartunya semua. He can use any apa namanya intelligence agencies to get you know. And this you have this from the highest level to the lowest level. And because of that, today I think we also have a very, very incapacitated state. In a fact, with the shadow state, you know, the real state is very incapacitated, but the shadow state is there, and this defining a lot of things that is happening in this country. I think that's what we have right now.
Who do you think that is a shadow state at this
Who?
point? Yeah.
Well, say this, political business. Political business. You know, I did. I worked for. I was involved in Indonesia Democracy Index for 11 years. I was involved in developing the tools and also following the implementations throughout all provinces in Indonesia. Everywhere you go, let me just maybe this is. I was going to say just a little, but now it's getting long. Sorry, let me say this. If you look into a local democracy, you will find a very interesting things. The legislators, for example, provincial legislators, never have initiative in proposing a bill. Almost zero everywhere you go. Perda, peraturan daerah yang datang dari inisiatifnya DPR, almost zero.
Because they don't work.
Now, if you pursue this, what's going on? You are legislators. You know, but you don't have any initiative in proposing this bill.
Mhm.
Another thing is actually also very interesting, recommendations. They also do not have any recommendations almost, very minimal recommendations to what need to be done in the provinces. When you ask that, this is what they say, usually. Well, we did give recommendations, when we have meetings in the office, when we have this or that. But not a formal letter of recommendations from the DPR, for instance. You can conclude actually what's going on. What is going on in the hotels and so on is actually more important for you. And who are actually present in that, you can also guess. The business and probably the power politics basically, that decide what is going to happen in the province or it's also national. And that's all, everything is already distributed there. And so on is probably just pancake things. We have that. And the elections 2024 was so that kind of because it can be bought.
Okay.
I think itu aja dulu.
Okay. The main problem of democracy is the political party.
Yes.
As the main machinery, because they are not doing democratic effort.
Yeah.
So that the president and the leaders are creating undemocratic policy.
Dua kalimat Pak Didi, nama sedikit.
Ya.
2 kalimat aja.
Please, yeah.
Because of the political party, the political party and the DPR is basically a partner. They send those people to the DPR. So my friends are in the epicenters of this corruption. So of course the DPR.
Okay. Former legislator Al-Mukarram Abdul Wahid Maktub, Vice President of PKB, please. Jangan bahasa Madura, Inggris. Madura ya. Mahfud MD colleague. Please ya.
Yeah. Is it clear my voice?
Yeah, yes. Okay.
Okay, thanks so much for excellent presentation. Yeah. So I enjoy your presentation. I'm thinking about the democracy and Islam, especially in Indonesia. I would like to know your opinion whether nowadays Indonesian politics is more Islamic or more democratic. This is the first. And then the second, sometimes we are very confused on setting the standard of level of democracy and the level of Islamicity. It depends on the scholar. Sometimes if we talk about Islam, which Islam? Where Islam? Is there any models? Because Islam, whether this is Islamic countries, for example, are trying, like Saudi Arabia, is it democratic or not? Or because they are in the kingdom. But in fact, in terms of economic, more democratic. Yeah. So sometimes it is paradox between measurement on political dimension and economic dimension. Yeah, especially in terms of prosperity and the wealthy of the community. While, for example, when we apply a true democracy from the Western view, like, for example, Al-Jumhuriyah or the republics, yeah, as applied and adopted in Egyptian, in fact, in terms of economics, they are poor. So this is sometimes the paradox of terminology between the bad and the good of the democracy and also the bad of the good of the Islam. So sometimes unconsciously you are trapped with the concept of Islam, yeah, as outlined by the scholar. But when I try to deepen myself with the Islam, it is something's difference here. Actually, Islam is the belief system which provide the universal values, while for the localities and operationalities, technicalities, it will be given wide space and opportunity to make what rationalizations. Yeah, so so it gives a freedom. So actually, we are trapped with the interpretation, misconception by the scholar. So that's why now we begin to realize about the importance of making renewal or tajdid, yeah, in order not to be trapped with the deceive of some scholar who trapped in the truth claim. They consider it is from God, but actually it is the interpretation of the Islamic teaching, not from God. God only outlined something is universal, very global. And then, so that's why, and then we bring in the name of God, in the name of, actually it is the name of the interest of the politician. So that's why how a scholar must be able to educate the public about the importance of which is what universal and essential, and which is local, which is temporary, yeah, and which is some things fixed, which salihul li kulli zaman wal makan, which is fit for all places and time, because Islam is universal. Jadi the strategic vision of Islam, not only for the Arab, not only for the Indonesian, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, and also the concept of God in Islam, not the Muslim God or the Arabic God, no, for the humanity. So sometimes we cannot differentiate between which is a universal, must be go to the mutual consensus among the public, and we cannot authorize to claim this is Islam, but actually it is our interpretation to the Islam. That's why we cannot claim that it is better or not in terms of terminology only, democratic. It is very relative. But in fact, in the reality, we must measure from the other dimension, because Islam is very complete belief system, which encompasses not only political dimension, but also economics, but also humanity. And finally, we must measure from the election. In fact, for example, even though from the scholar perspective, we can consider the current situation in Indonesian politics is undemocratic, but in fact, regardless, it is happen with the political rigging or the voting, but in fact, the vote of for the current president satisfaction, something that's still high. So that's why how we can create a standard which can be widely accepted by all, not only by only single parties, but all parties can accept this measurement. Can you offer some measurement or standard which can be widely accepted by all parties? We are not confusing. Thank you very much.
Okay, as far as I know, yeah, my friend Abdul Wahid Maktub is transforming himself from lawmaker to be the preacher. That's the example of what Pak Lutfi, Dr. Lutfi mentioned, politik more liberal, and then society more conservative. Yeah, the sample is. Thank you, Pak Abdul Wahid. Ya. Terima kasih, Matur Kelangko. Your response.
Wow. Yes.
I think in general, not one by one.
Yeah.
So we will stop 3:30.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all the insights you all shared. There are actually, I'm very impressed that Indonesia's democracy actually has some light, given that we can have this discussion at a university with all these scholars and talk about sharing the concerns about Indonesia's democracy. That means that it has actually future in Indonesia's democracy. And I'm not just doing lip service. Going through, as myself was a democracy activist in Korea growing up, and now how I see Korea right now, things change, and there's no big solution to keeping country democracy. Because power, any power all the power will corrupt, absolute power corrupts. It's not about somebody who's being democratic or not. So given, like, after going through that, what makes a democracy is the people like us that who are awake and try to watch the system and concerned about it and take action, and these are the people. And I think absolutely right. I want to just highlight a few points. Checks and balances are definitely missing. And also, because which is a very set, and the powers are concentrated on certain elites. We are seeing the new dynasty, because one of the reasons that Jokowi was elected in 2014 and everybody hailed Indonesia's democracy, because he was not part of former Suharto, like coalition, and he's a new figure. Indonesian democratic system allowed the new people, new figures, without any kind of connection to the former power, were able to enter politics and flourish. So it was an open system compared to Philippines, Thailand, relatively those kind of bars for entering, new figure entering was pretty high. But then now we don't see that. You mentioned that like money is the, money actually makes the politicians, everything can be bought. I mean, it's absolutely correct. And it's just that thing is, but at the same time, right, the system, and system of like no opposition, as you mentioned, no opposition, grand coalition. System of grand coalition works very well when country face crisis. That's not what I'm saying. That's actually the famous scholars have already researched and said, like a coalition, right? Like Jokowi made, there's zero opposition, works very well when you face national crisis. But if you use that kind of coalition during the normal times, you can actually create the more actually corruption and collusion that will be detrimental to democracy. So that's absolutely right that all this, initially we talked about who's gonna, Prabowo is going to buy which parties and so forth, and who's going to be the true opposition. But look at it from the historical perspective. Since democratization, there was not much of time that Indonesia had opposition, right? Like even like each president, there was a little bit of SBY, Megawati, a little bit of tension, but so maybe PDIP, but even the PKS initially, but they're not really also opposition. So there's no clear place for opposition, which makes it harder for party politics to stay incorrupt, right? And what then be the future for democracy will be a civil society. But sadly, the Basnara already mentioned that we see weakening of civil society, more corruption in party politics. And within party politics, it's really hard to find the voice to make it clear, make it actually cleaner, because there's a lack of checks and balances. Then hope is actually should be in civil society. But now even the civil society is divided between pro-Jokowi and anti-Jokowi. And a lot of people are bought into the government, to the grand coalition, so that leaves a very little space for the civil society. So I think those are really accurate and said observation. But then what I could say, as a person who also went through authoritarian regime myself and democracy, and also still looking at other like countries' democratic erosion or democratic sliding, still power lies in people, like civil society. Somehow we have to work to share the ideas of or the role of enforcing checks and balances from outside of the government. I know it's easy to said and done, but that's probably the only way to maintain Indonesia's democracy, given all the things that are happening at the same time. And especially that one of you mentioned like, but still the popularity of Jokowi is really too high, like 70–80%. But then think about all the things that happen over time of that 10 years. Their deterioration of KPK was like astounding. That was the like face of Indonesia's democracy. It becomes a like almost farce of Indonesia's democracy if you look at how KPK changes, right? So all these things, it's Indonesia now face huge challenges, maintaining its name, its title of third largest democracy in the world. Going back to, and I also want to at least mention something about Pak Abdul Wahid Maktub. Thank you for
Abdul Wahid Maktub.
Waktu Wahid Maktub. And is Indonesia more Islamic and more democratic? I think definitely it's not more democratic than earlier, but Islamic. Well, I guess Islam, like what, I guess really, what do you mean by Islamic, right? I think the plural, like we see different faces of Islam, and that's the strength of Islam. There's no one can say this is the Islam. Should we say Wahhabis is only Islam, or like, belief of all this Shaivism, or, like Islam itself allows all different kind of tradition and also school of thoughts. And I think that's the strength. The reason that the science of religion, right, fiqh was able to exist was there's no one else but God can tell us what is right and what is wrong. Until then, we strive to follow the teachings of the God's teaching. But I cannot say that you are wrong because my faith seems to be stronger, or like I can't use God's name to invalidate your thoughts. Therefore, Islam itself, I think, carries the pluralism and also respect for different school of thought to develop. In that sense, even the Quran itself does not define what it means to be Islamic State. And therefore, when it comes to Islamic State in the world, or Muslims majority states, we see different government of different forms of government, and no one can tell us which one is more Islamic than others. Because if you are actually looking at the values of humanity, right, like those respects and all the teachings of Islam, then actually it doesn't really matter. We need to look at which form of government will allow Islamic teachings to be fulfilled. Then there was no certain way. It doesn't need to be a kingdom, doesn't need to be, but there's a compatibility of Islam and democracy. Because Islamic teaching, democratic form, government form might be coming from Roman, like Greece, and they're coming from there, but Islamic values like mushawara, right? All this consultation and consensus, all these values that are actually very democratic that existed in Islamic teachings from the very beginning. So in that sense, yes, there are different people interpret Islam in a very different way, right? And often there is a contestation, and also there's a contestation about whose interpretation is correct. But again, I think we have to use our istihad, right? Like our rational thinking interpretation of Quran, and say that, is this the right way, right? And is that the way that will actually fulfill the Islamic teachings? And of that, like, you know, all this respect and humanity and so forth, right? If that's not the best form, probably it's not being Islamic. Just because we have, you know, Sharia law doesn't mean that it's Islamic. If there's the other part of humanity, it's not respected in that form, my view. So popularity alone does not guarantee democracy. If the people's voices are silenced, right? If people who are corrupt cannot be actually punished, and there's a collusion among people that there's no way, and they can no need to even work, and they, you know, enjoy the privilege of being in that position. It's not, it's a sign. It's a sign that their democracy is declining. So I think we share the concerns, sadly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes, maybe one from here, or we have student.
Yeah.
Ms. Handoko, wait. Ms. Handoko, would you like to express your opinion about this system?
Yeah,
Please,
sure.
yes.
Thank you very much.
Not part of the exam.
Especially to the professors that make their remarks. Mungkin saya bahasa Inggris biar lebih lancar.
Okay, please.
I think Prof. Scenario, you mentioned, you know, like the three kind of defining factors that how Indonesia has progressed from the New Order era. One of it is politik terbuka, terus juga civil society, then also good governance, right? I think in all the remarks given by the different dosen, we hear this idea of politik terbuka and partai politics. I'm personally wondering how much of a deliberative democracy is Indonesia going for, right? Because if we think about the literature on democracy, one of it is indeed the idea of procedural democracy, right? The idea that you have multi-party competitions, you have the accessibility of voters' rights, right? And so on that basic front, Indonesia has achieved it, right? All over the world, when the Pemilu happened in February, you know, the Times, Guardian, they're all celebrating the degrees and the lengths to which Indonesian democracy took to actually get everyone to vote, right? But when we talk about moving from procedural democracy to deliberative democracy, here we're talking about empowering people with the thinking skill, right? The ability to choose their candidates in office, right? And I think that's where perhaps is Indonesia missing the point, or has it lost its vision of a deliberative democracy, right? Because among the three parties, I think one idea that's been floated up again and again is that there is very little differentiation in the policies, right? Apa yang mendiferensiasi kebijakan dari Prabowo, dari Anies, dari Ganjar, like what is the difference here, right? And how does it appeal to the voters themselves, right? And so, and I think it really speaks as well to maaf tadi saya nggak tangkap nama.
Malik, Dr. Malik
Yeah,
Ismail
Prof. Malik, yeah, tadi.
from New York University.
Yes, right.
Di sana ya? Oh ya.
Right, yeah, Prof. Malik, tadi, you said something about how the local democracy is not quite working, right? Because legislators are not
Yeah.
doing their job,
Ya, ya.
right? And so, I mean, I'm a sociologist, I'm not a political scientist. And so I'm more interested in, you know, what is the spirit, what is the value of democracy that we're talking about? And I'm wondering if perhaps the issue here is that Indonesia hasn't quite figured out how does it value democracy, right? Is it just in the ability to vote? Or is it in the ability of people being able to talk to their legislators and say that we need more money for pendidikan, we need more money for our health system, right? So, I mean, if I had it my way, I would like to ask, you know, each and every one of you, like, what does democracy mean to you, right? Does it just mean your ability to vote, right? That you can say you are part of one of the world's largest democracies? Or is it that you have an actual vision in terms of, like, we want every student that goes through college to be able to talk about political rights, right? To talk about human rights. I think that's an important question to ask, because otherwise we talk about the lack of civil society as well, right? With the Ormas. It seems like without asking ourselves, what are we expecting of a deliberative democracy? It kind of blurs the question of what are we expecting of civil society groups? Apa ekspektasi dari masyarakat untuk civil society groups, right? Is it to further one party's agenda? Is it to teach voters about what they're going to vote for? I think that's something that I would be very interested in everyone of you about, but I think that kind of tempers the discussion between party politics is definitely very important. But I guess I'm wondering, like, what about the people who are standing by as party politics is happening, right? Because the fact that there's, is it 79% voter satisfaction for Jokowi's presidency so far? That also shows kind of like I don't know, you can call it complacency, can you call it how do you say, capitulation for the current state of things. So I guess I'm wondering, as warga negara Indonesia itu ekspektasi untuk demokrasi Indonesia itu apa? Yeah, I think it boils down to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, good observation. Yeah, but unfortunately, we have now together both declining of democracy and declining of rupiah to dollar. Exchange rupiah to dollar also declining. Oke, itu ada Randi ya, itu muridnya Pak Lutfi ya, jadi nanti dijawab dulu. Mau jawab? Oke, thank you ya, makasih ya Pak Lutfi ya. Ya nanti Pak Randi dijawab oleh Pak Lutfi ya. Would you like to have a comment? No?
Yes. So, Pak Landi, thank you. Antara Islam dan democracy, like, so I think the main kondisi agama. So, I think it's a problem when like institution like Majelis Ulama Indonesia becomes the kind of like politically driven in rather than actually religiously pure sort of doing fatwas in more religious perspective. I think it's not that very helpful. So I think I could understand the Pak Landi's suggestion of apakah sebaliknya MUI dibubarkan saja sehingga demokrasi bisa berjalan baik. I think it's a very I think that's really important observation. I think some sort of I guess I can say one thing. There was political empowerment of MUI definitely influenced a lot of people and how the religion should be viewed by people. I think too much of overlap in power between MUI and government is not good. So it will be great that MUI becomes a less of the powerful institution, direct what's right Islam and what's good Islam. Instead, let everybody to be able to practice their religion in their own rational way might be better. So I do agree with the sentiment that brought up in this question. And it will be important to look at what role or what position the MOE should play in Indonesian society and politics is a very important question, but also it might not be great to dibubarkan, because that could create the also backlash. It looks like another repression of religion if you actually disassemble, right, the institution that has existed under Suharto regime. So it has to be very careful when the state handles the religion, right? Like we talked about even HTI and FPI, some people like it would be considered as a repression, and just that like getting rid of it is not always an option to make it more democratic, but it will be important to talk about it together and have a more openness ensure the openness of MOE. And so changing characteristics of MOE might be very necessary. But thank you for the very good question.
Oke, thank you. Saya kira waktunya cukup ya. Nanti diskusi aja sama. Kamu mau ngomong?
Boleh.
Oh, silakan nih, 3 menit ya. Oke. Septa, ini mau ngambil dokter nanti ke sini aja. Lecture ya.
Ya.
Sini ya.
Thank you for your suggestion. I like to see this. I like to specifically address the question, but where is Islamist group?
Where is, yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to address a very basic question. What is Islam that we need? And from the perspective of sociology, we cannot say Islam merely based on the value or norms, but how its value or norm interact with the specific background of society where Islam exists.
Right.
So there is no country or society can claim as a best representation of Islam from Indonesia to Morocco.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think in case of Indonesian politics, why sometimes Islam matters and sometimes it doesn't matter. I like to borrow the idea of Charles Tilly about activation and deactivation of identity. Sometimes identity can matters because, like Jakarta's gubernatorial election in 2016, that can be activated because identity can be strategically amplified as a political tool. But in the last Indonesian presidential election, it cannot be activated because it cannot be used as a political tool because the identity well distributed into all of candidates, equally distributed into the 3 candidates. They can amplify Islam as their identity. So Islam less matter. I think that is from my
Okay.
Thank you.
Septa is our graduate from Paramadina ya. BS, his BS in Paramadina, philosophy and graduate master from Indonesia and now lecturing in Indonesia. I have to give him 2 years to enter PhD program. If not, I will put him in administrative staff. So you have to help him.
So that he doesn't become our administrative staff.
You want to be politician.
But well.
Used to be, but I stopped
So,
to be.
Mau menjadi politisi atau political science?
Already, but fail. Used to be.
Oh.
so now the transition for him, you have to finish to start to study PhD in 2 years.
Itu ya.
If not, I will put him in as administrator staff. So I hope you can save him.
I can enroll.
Yeah, that's really.
Okay.
That's really the
I mean,
contract. Really contract for him, ya. Disaksikan semua.
So like pressure.
Okay, and now penutup ya, penutup and you answer also dari.
Ya, boleh satu dikit.
Oh ya, ya. Oh ya,
Terima
silakan.
kasih Pak.
Ah, ya.
Short
Oke.
Profesor saya Suratno, antropologi.
Dr. Suratno.
Oh,
Jadi saya mau melihatnya secara kultural saja, tapi ini berkaitan dengan kalau menurut saya apa jalannya mungkin pengaruh atau kondisi Islam ya. Banyak pengamat mengatakan bahwa memang kita sekarang sedang proses demokrasi dan ada kalimat yang saya baca kira-kira sederhana ini. Jadi demokrasi liberal yang sudah kita bangun sejak 1998 ya. Sekarang declining dan kemudian agak bergeser. Kita menyebutnya apa demokrasi neoliberal yang terutama berkoalisi dengan apa feodalisme Jawa. Karena apa istilahnya pengaruh Jokowi yang sangat besar gitu. Dan juga apa istilahnya kalau kita melihat walaupun tadi Pak Nito mengatakan periode SBY kan stagnation ya, ada buku from stagnation to regression ya. Tapi memang kecenderungannya ke sini secara kultural saya melihatnya justru yang berkembang adalah demokrasi neoliberal berkoalisi dengan feodalisme ala Jawa yang dipraktekkan oleh banyak elit. Nah, yang jadi pertanyaan adalah terutama ya kalau kita bicara Islam dan politik, di mana sebenarnya aktor-aktor Islam, bagaimana mereka mempengaruhi selain struktur politik atau katakanlah budaya politik ya, bahasa antropolog ya, budaya politik sehingga katakanlah yang dibangun itu adalah bisa saja kita bergeser saja demokrasi liberal Barat, kita demokrasi Pancasila dalam pengertian yang Islamis lah, di mana aktor-aktor apa Islam itu turut berkontribusi di situ. Tapi yang kita lihat Jokowi jelas dia abangan. SBY dulu kita juga abangan. Jadi imajinasi budaya politik yang mereka konstruksikan itu adalah, nah, kalau saya Soeharto kalau Jokowi ya, dan Solo bukan Jokowi ya, feodalisme Jawa, gitu, Raja Jawa. Jadi kalau orang mengatakan Petruk jadi ratu dan sebagainya ya, nah itu apa istilahnya itu yang kita lihat perkembangannya. Nah itu kita nggak melihat aktor-aktor Muslim. Misalnya Ma'ruf Amin kan menjadi wakil presiden ya. Kenapa yang nggak muncul tagline misalnya Ma'ruf Amin sebagai pemimpin yang profetik misalnya, karena dia representasi kalangan Islami. Jadi memang dalam konteks kepemimpinan nasional kita ada defisit, terutama aktor-aktor Islam. Sehingga kalau sekarang misalnya kita membaca demokrasi turun, kemudian bergerak ke arah ya istilahnya demokrasi liberal lah, karena punya duit kan. Tapi koalisinya dengan feodalisme Jawa, politik dinasti dan sebagainya, itu juga the absence of menurut saya aktor-aktor Islam politik. Bahkan sekelas Ma'ruf Amin menurut saya influennya kan kecil ya. Padahal bayangan saya Ma'ruf Amin kalau menjadi wakil, tapi kan dia representasi Islam ya. Kemudian dia surya PBNU, saya pernah itu dengan UNI. Tapi kita tidak muncul misalnya imajinasi Ma'ruf Amin dalam beberapa ya kepemimpinan profetik. Kalau Islam kan gitu ya. Dan tentu saja kalau kita bicara kepemimpinan profetik itu tentang Islam ini ada demokrasinya. Tapi yang kita lihat itu feodalisme Jawa, istilahnya politik dinasti dan sebagainya yang dari sisi budaya Islamnya the absence of Islam. Menurut saya bacanya sederhana seperti itu. Terima kasih.
Very nice analysis. Yeah, we come back of Japanese feudalism. The base is democracy, but the inside is Japanese feudalism. Now we have, now we have to close, closing remark from Pak Sunarjo. You answer and closing remark.
Ya, terima kasih. Ini terima kasih Bu Ujung. Jadi kalau ke Jakarta memang kayaknya harus mampir ke Paramadina.
Oh iya,
Iya.
kayaknya.
Waktu yang lalu banyak rilisnya di media.
Oh iya, ya.
Dan di Paramadina ini sangat beragam. Jadi meskipun rektornya punya preferensi politik tertentu, misalnya yang lain belum tentu sama.
Mhm.
Jadi itu menggambarkan
Tertentu itu apa maksudnya?
yang hidup itu pasti punya preferensi kan.
Ini siapa Prabowo? Kalau Paramadina Anies, kalau partai Prabowo, kalau Madura Mahfud.
Ya, jadi di sini cukup beragam. Jadi kita sebenarnya secara media itu mencoba untuk mentradisikan juga dari level kita yang paling kecil, bagaimana demokrasi harus dipraktekkan. Meskipun tentu saja tantangannya seperti tadi dikatakan Pak Surato dalam kata yang budaya besar yang mayoritas di kawasan Jawa, hal-hal semacam tadi akhirnya tidak terhindarkan. Dalam politik itu relasi patron klien itu kita bisa saksikan gitu. Jadi orang cara merayu pacar kecil itu dengan bansos itu sangat efektif karena orang tahu bahwa siapa yang memberi dia yang harus dipilih. Jadi ya artinya itu memang relasi yang secara kultural demikian. Tapi saya rasa mungkin kenapa ya tadi Kak Pipit sudah menyampaikan sejak awal imajinasi kita para foreign partners tentang Indonesia itu adalah negara yang berasaskan demokrasi. Jadi memang meskipun situ di DPUPK ada banyak orang Jawa, tapi mereka tetap mengidealkan bahwa Indonesia itu berbasiskan pada demokrasi dan berbasiskan pada monarki atau sistem institusional. Barangkali itu saja dari saya.
Oke, you answer and closing kita.
Wow. Thank you very much for all the actually very sophisticated observations from all the scholars here. It's an honor to be here. And the fact that we can have this conversation at University of Paramadina, where you emphasize that sangat beragam, right? I think this is actually, it's a very good sign for Indonesia. And I hope we can continue this kind of conversation that where everybody can voice out and our diversity can exist at the same time, not jeopardizing any other people's rights, will be that will be actually a great example of democracy at the local level. And I'm so glad to see that Paramadina University still is very strong and values this kind of pluralism and inclusion of different ideas. It means it actually provides the seed for democracy to Indonesia. So I once again thank you for Rector for inviting me. And if there's any deficiencies in my presentation or anything, please understand. And I am always more than welcome, more than happy to visit Paramadina University and share ideas with all this scholars.
Thank you. Oke, Bapak Ibu sekalian, saya kira terima kasih ya. Banyak pertanyaan, saya kira nanti ya diskusi kalau Ibu En Sukjung masih ada waktu ya. Saya kira demikian ya, saya tutup ya. Selamat sore semuanya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih. Can we take a photo?